Princess Alice led an extraordinary life spanning nearly a century of tremendous change. Born in 1885 at the height of the Victorian era, she was a princess descended from royalty across Europe. However, her life was far from the sheltered luxury typically associated with royalty. She endured war, exile, mental illness, personal tragedy, and financial uncertainty, all while demonstrating tremendous strength, compassion, and faith. Alice's early life gave little hint at the tumult to come. She was born at Windsor Castle to Princess Victoria of Hesse and Prince Louis of Battenberg. Her grandmother was none other than the legendary Queen Victoria, then at the peak of her powerful reign over the vast British Empire. Alice enjoyed an idyllic childhood traveling Europe's royal courts in aristocratic circles. She formed close bonds with her siblings and relatives like the Russian imperial family. At 17, she married Prince Andrew of Greece and became Princess Andrew upon her wedding. Lavish gifts like diamond tiaras from the Russian Tsarina filled her trousseau. Within a few years, Princess Andrew found herself embroiled in the bloody Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913. Ever dutiful, she fulfilled her royal obligations by working diligently to organize field hospitals for wounded soldiers with the assistance of nurses trained in modern medical practices. Her selfless service was recognized in 1913 when King George V awarded her the prestigious Royal Red Cross. Little did she know that in just over a decade, another great war would erupt across Europe. Motherhood soon followed for Alice as she gave birth to 4 daughters in quick succession. But her life was increasingly marked by uncertainty as conflict engulfed the Balkans. By the time her only son, Prince Philip, was born in 1921, Greece was already in a state of turmoil. The following year, Alice and her family were forced into exile when her uncle, King Constantine I, was deposed. Fleeing Athens, they boarded a British naval ship with the infant Philip carried in an orange crate converted into a makeshift crib. Hardly the expected transportation for royalty, but such was the suddenness of their distressed flight. The struggling royal family found refuge in Paris, living primarily on the charity of relatives. The stress and scarcity of those years left Alice physically exhausted and mentally distraught. As the 1930s dawned, her mental health deteriorated markedly. She became increasingly detached from reality, losing herself in vivid hallucinations and religious delusions. Voices and visions engulfed her waking hours. Her behavior turned more erratic, which thoroughly alarmed her relatives. In 1930, Alice experienced a full nervous breakdown and was finally diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Her husband promptly committed her to a sanatorium outside of Berlin. It was there that she came under the care of Sigmund Freud himself. The pioneering psychiatrist endeavored to treat her with a controversial method meant to restrain women's sexuality, which he deemed a contributing factor in mental illness. She received X-ray radiation targeting her ovaries in order to prematurely terminate her fertility. The procedure plunged her into early menopause and did nothing to improve her debilitating mental illness. Despite the continuing estrangement from her husband and children, Alice emerged from the sanatorium in 1932 and began her long, slow journey toward rebuilding her life. She devoted herself to charity work benefiting the poor even as she struggled financially herself, often relying on the reluctant support of relatives. When World War II erupted, she remained trapped in Nazi-occupied territories. Then, in truly extraordinary circumstances, she hid a Jewish family in her home, saving them from persecution by the Nazis despite the enormous personal risk of discovery and imprisonment. At the time Alice closed houses, her young son Philip was just 9 years old. He had been on a picnic with his grandmother one day and returned home to find his mother simply gone. Philip's father, Prince Andrew, had essentially abandoned his wife to go live permanently with his mistress on the French Riviera, not even bothering to divorce her. He would die there in 1944, leaving Alice still locked away in the sanatorium. With no parents to care for him, Philip was shipped between various relatives during his childhood. He attended boarding schools in Britain and only saw his mother rarely during school holidays. When Alice was finally released from the sanatorium in 1932 after 2.5 years, She drifted between modest bed and breakfast establishments in Germany, struggling to get by. Mother and son would not be reunited until 1937 at the funeral of Philip's sister Cecily, who had died tragically at age 26 in a plane crash. By then, 16-year-old Philip was focused on his future career in the Royal Navy. His mother wanted him to return to Athens with her following the restoration of the Greek monarchy in 1935, but he refused, leaving her to return there alone once more. By 1941, during World War II, Alice was stranded in Nazi-occupied Greece. Philip's uncle Lord Mountbatten arranged for her to receive food parcels to aid her survival. Remarkably, despite being isolated under Nazi control, Alice hid a Jewish family on the top floor of her Athens home, which was located mere yards away from the Gestapo headquarters. When Gestapo agents grew suspicious and questioned her, Alice refused to respond, using her deafness as an excuse to ignore their interrogation. As Prince Philip later reflected, "I suspect that it never occurred to her that her action was in any way special. She was a person with deep religious faith, and she would have considered it to be a totally human action to fellow human beings in distress." Following the war, diamonds from Alice's tiara were used by Philip to craft an engagement ring for Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen of England. Needing money, Alice sold off the remainder of her jewels to establish a religious order called the Christian Sisterhood of Martha and Mary in 1949. She had become a nun and went on to construct both a convent and orphanage in a poor suburb of Athens, where she cared for struggling children. Alice remained in Greece until the military junta took power in 1967. As the political situation deteriorated, she refused to leave despite Philip's pleas, until he finally sent a plane for her along with a personal request from Queen Elizabeth. Alice then lived out her final years residing in Buckingham Palace, near her son and daughter-in-law. She passed away in 1969 at age 84. Although originally laid to rest in the royal crypt at Windsor Castle, Alice had wished to be buried near her Aunt Ella, the Grand Duchess Elizabeth Fyodorovna, at the Russian Orthodox convent on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. Nearly 50 years later in 2018, Prince William visited her grave during an official royal tour of the Middle East. He took the time to honor Princess Alice by laying flowers at the site and proclaiming his deep admiration for her astonishing bravery in sheltering a Jewish family from the Nazis. The last months of Alice's incredible life story were fictionalized in the Netflix drama series The Crown, though it incorrectly depicted her giving a tell-all interview about personal topics like her mental health issues, something the very private princess would have never actually done. Shortly before she died at Buckingham Palace, Princess Alice wrote one final heartbreaking letter to her son Philip. It read, "Dearest Philip, be brave, and remember I will never leave you, and you will always find me when you need me most. All my devoted love, your old mama." Dear friend, if you like everything new about the royal family and don't want to miss all the novelties, subscribe to our channel and like it. By doing so, you take part in our development. We work for you.